So there's a lot of terminology in the assessment module. So let's look at this visually. Overall, we have the assessment tool, and that comprises of all of the assessment documents that then collectively come together to make the assessment tool. Here at Evoke, you'll notice that some of the files that you're saving, we refer to them as the assessment report, but within the vet sector, the terminology is the assessment tool. So you've worked on assessment plans. So the assessment tool will start with the assessment plan, and then you've started to look at the mapping of evidence. This is where we bring across the performance criterion, and you were actually able to tick the question column for 4.2 there and create your own question. So all of that table of mapping will come across into the assessment tool. Then we build into the tool the assessment instruments. So the instruments are used there to determine whether a candidate is working at a satisfactory or an unsatisfactory level, and they will usually contain some sort of assessor guideline or benchmarks themselves to help an assessor determine if a satisfactory performance has occurred. So some examples of those would be observation checklists for some tasks and some questions. So you've actually seen examples of the question instrument. And then finally, at the end of this, we actually have a record of results. So first of all, we'll look at a few other instruments. Okay, you can use the instruments as a formative form of assessment, so we're checking for understanding as the course is progressing, or as a summative assessment, which means this is the final summation and we're gathering evidence to determine competency. We use benchmarks in these instruments. So for example, a benchmark would be the red text on the question tool, and then any assessor could pick up the benchmarks and determine if the question's been answered satisfactorily or not. Templates and pro formas are another form of instrument. So for example, in the recognised prior learning, we'd have templates for gathering your own evidence. And some of the pro formas or the forms would be the third party report with built-in statements that directly relate to performance criterion around any recognised prior learning credit that's going to be issued from, or testified toward from an employer. We talked about the question instruments. We've got activities with the observation checklists. You might have some checklists or some assessor guides around any particular work products or work samples. And then you might have some self-assessment tools as well. That's another form of evidence or another form of instrument. And you can also purchase some instruments, and if you're purchasing, or if your RTO is actually purchasing assessment products from companies, the RTO or the supervising assessor needs to make sure that it's still contextualised to meet the needs of the particular client. So here at Evoke, we create our own materials so they're always contextualised directly for the client. We don't go and pre-purchase anybody else's product. So we know exactly what we're training to, we know exactly how it's mapping. Now, an assessment method that's different from an assessment tool or an assessment instrument. The methods, I've broken ours down into 3 categories. So we've got observation, questions, and product. And within that, you're looking at some of the methods. Okay, so you might be directly observing them in the workplace. You might be observing a simulated environment. In fact, direct observation can be of the product or the work sample itself, because it's still a very strong piece of evidence. Your questions, as you know, are supplementary evidence, but a strong form of evidence to be able to show knowledge. So some examples are either direct questions as an assessment method or written questions, or perhaps a self-assessment tool. Products for review, which is the third category that we cluster things into here at Evoke, involve work samples that are collected, so especially if people are looking at recognised prior learning, or work samples that have been produced directly from instruction during a course. We use the YouTubes to instruct how to complete the particular assessment plans and other forms during the training and assessment course. And of course, a product could include third-party reports or qualifications, all of that type of supplementary evidence, then your curriculum vitae or resume.